afternoon, everyone. Welcome to One Public Library's virtual presentation. Uh, I, I would like to invite Dr. Bisleen Attli to do this mental wellness workshop. And before that, I just want to read out land acknowledgement. The land acknowledgement. On behalf of One Public Libraries, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that our libraries were built upon the territory and the treaty lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation per the Toronto Purchase Agreement or Treaty 13. We also recognize we are situated in the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee who occupied this land before the arrival of European settlers. The city of Vaughan is currently home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge their contributions to the life and the prosperity of this land. A representatives of the people of the city of Vaughan, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. Thank you. Once again, welcome everyone. And also, I kindly request Dr. Attli to take over.
Thank you, Subramania. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. My name is Dr. Bisleen Attli. And over the next hour, I'm going to be taking you through a workshop where I'm going to be really teaching you how to take care of your own mental health and really how to build a positive environment at home. So if you are a parent or know any young people in your life, you're going to really learn some great tips as to how you can also support their mental health. So I will get started by sharing my PowerPoint presentation. I am going to have the chat open, so if at any point you have any questions about what I am sharing, I love answering questions, so I encourage you to type your questions in the chat, and I'm more than happy to answer them as they come up, or feel free to unmute yourself, whatever feels comfortable. So a little bit about me. I am a naturopathic doctor. I have my own private practice. It is virtual, so I see patients from all over Ontario, and I solely focus on mental health and really teaching people how to optimize their brain using a holistic approach. I'm also really passionate about supporting parents, teachers, and students as well. So I do a lot of work in schools to really teach people, again, how to build great mental health. And so to get started, I really want to share the basics of mental health with all of you, because the truth is that there is still a lot of stigma in our society when it comes to mental health and well-being. And the reason for that is because a lot of us still aren't fully educated on what mental health is, the myths of mental health, and even signs that we need support. And the more of us that can be educated and share this education with everybody else around us, the less stigma around mental health will exist. So essentially, mental health, and this is actually a definition from the World Health Organization, it's a state of well-being where an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively, and make a contribution to his or her own community. And it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And in here, I would even, jump a little bit because I'm a naturopathic doctor, and even include physical well-being, right? Because our mind and body is connected. Everything that happens up here gets communicated to everything down here, and everything that happens down here gets communicated to up here. So our mental health essentially impacts everything in our lives. And just some myths I wanted to share of mental health with all of you. These are the most common ones that, even I hear in practice with the people that I work with. So mental illnesses are not real illnesses, and this is not true at all. They are very much real, and just because we can't see someone actually suffering like you can with a physical illness doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And that's why it's so important to remember that if we can't expect someone with a broken arm to just get over it, right? Like if I broke my arm right now, like none of you would be like, yeah, just get over it, right? Like continue with the presentation. No, you'd be like, you need to go to the hospital right now, and you need to get some support and put your arm in a cast. And so the same thing that goes with someone who has a mental illness, right? We can't just expect someone to just get over it, and it isn't as easy as that. Myth number 2, bad parenting causes mental illnesses. So a lot of people can sometimes blame a parent, or parents can blame themselves if their child is suffering. And it's really important to remember that mental illnesses are not because of just one thing. Mental illnesses are very complex, and oftentimes there's so many different factors playing a role, and more than just parenting. Okay. Can it contribute to it? Yes, but so can 100 other things. Myth number 3, people with mental illnesses are violent and dangerous. And so, again, this is not true at all. And what the research has shown is that people who experience mental illnesses are no more violent than people without a mental illness. And it's actually excluding people from communities that's linked to violence. And unfortunately, those suffering with mental illnesses tend to be the most excluded. Myth number 4, kids can't have a mental illness like depression. And the truth here is that most mental illnesses actually appear when a child is younger. About 80% of mental illnesses are actually diagnosed when during those youth ages, right? So those adolescent years. And it's so important that, if you do have an adolescent in your life, that you are being mindful of their mental health. And if they're coming to you expressing that they might need support with that, it's important to take them seriously, right? Because sometimes we can just be like, oh, it's just a phase or it's their age, but it's important that we are listening to our young people and giving them that support, because it can really have detrimental impacts on their health and well-being and just overall life long term. And then myth number 5, everyone gets depressed as they get older. And again, that is just not true. Depression is not a part of aging, and especially not a part of healthy aging. Looking at these myths, is there anything else that you might have heard about mental health or mental illness that you feel like I might have missed? If you want to type it in the chat. Any other myths you've heard, or just, this can be like family members or friends talking about mental health and well-being. No one's heard anything? Let's have at least one person share. I'm very patient, so I can sit here for a while. Mental health is worse in the winter. Yeah. So that actually is not a myth, depending on what's kind of happening with your body. Because for a lot of people, and honestly, like everyone I treat in my practice, their vitamin D is just so low. So we can be missing some really key nutrients during the winter. So mental health can legitimately be worse for quite a few people if they're not supplementing with the right nutrients. And oftentimes a lot of us tend to stay inside, which is also not healthy for us. So changes in lifestyle habits in the winter can also make winter be a lot worse. So that's not fully a myth, but thanks for sharing. The other piece that I wanted to share of just general mental health education are just signs and symptoms that you need support. More and more, the trend that I'm starting to see is that a lot of us find it really difficult to understand and know when it's time to get help and when what we were experiencing is normal, right? Like emotions like anxiety, stress, those are all normal emotions that we experience, right? But when they get not so normal is when they really start to impact our day-to-day life, and when they start to cause us to experience these types of symptoms, right? So if you're experiencing a specific emotion for more than 2 weeks, right, or highs and lows of emotions, social withdrawal, so you don't really feel like talking to your friends and family. And you can even take these signs and symptoms and use them to take note of how people in your life are doing, right? If you're starting to notice a close one or a child at home having these symptoms, it's time to get help and support, or at least have a discussion about their mental health. Changes in appetite or sleeping patterns, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities, right? So if you're someone who loved to walk and you just don't anymore, or maybe you have a child who, loved to play sports and now they're not doing that stuff, it's important to check in. Growing inability to cope with daily problems and activities. And some of the more severe symptoms include delusions, hallucinations, right? Seeing or hearing things that aren't there, false accusations about reality, substance abuse, there's self-harm and suicidal thoughts. And I also always love to just share child specific symptoms as well. And so when I say child specific, you know, I'm mostly referring to young kids, around the age. So let's just say around the age or less than 12 to 13, right? Because Less than that age, sometimes children have a really hard time communicating what they're feeling. And oftentimes, a lot of children, they don't know depression or anxiety, or maybe they've heard these words, but they don't really know what it means, right? So a child can have a hard time communicating they're anxious or stressed out, but sometimes their physical body will actually show these symptoms. So depression in children can actually come out in the form of irritability, lethargy, so that's feeling really tired and exhausted, lack of interest in activities, and then self-destructive behavior, right? So if you have a child who's throwing really big tantrums, or they have a really bad temper, really considering the mental health piece of things as well. And then anxiety, so this one I see all the time: stomach aches and headaches, right? So if your child is having these consistently, right, having it once or twice, maybe legitimately is something wrong with the stomach, but if there's these consistent patterns happening of these symptoms in your child, or a child then it's really important to check in with the mental health piece of things. Yeah, there's a question.
Sorry, not a question, but this reminded me also of changes in physical health can impact mental health.
Yeah, and that's such a great point you bring up. Yeah.
For
And that's
example,
my
yeah.
sorry.
No, 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 because I've just been recently diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I may look fine,
Yeah.
but just the inside, my insides have changed and my mental health has changed. And I do need support in that respect.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that you bring up such a great point of just mental health in general, right? Like, looking at anyone, anybody can seem like they're okay, but inside they might not be feeling okay at all. And that's why it's also so important to, especially if you have, young people in your life, or even friends or family, right? Like, checking in on people, because people can say they're fine, but they're anything but fine. And there's such a huge mind body connection when it comes to mental health. And although these are child specific symptoms, I treat so many adults who have stomach aches and they have very severe anxiety, or they'll have headaches, and that's actually like a panic attack coming on, or they're about to have an onset of really high anxiety. So although these are child specific, this can also happen in adults. And an interesting thing too is that sometimes mentally we feel like we're not stressed out, or mentally we feel like we're not anxious, but then our body is showing something completely different. And so it's important that you're not ignoring the signs your body is pointing at as well, because if you don't listen to your body, it can lead to a detrimental impact long term. So tune into your body, see what it's saying. Even if you are feeling stressed, even if you're feeling fine during a challenge, your body might feel differently. And so that is just another indicator that you either need more help and support, or it's time for you to start implementing your stress management coping strategies. And so a question I wanted to ask all of you is, how are you putting yourself last? I know this is a workshop about putting yourself first, and I'm going to be teaching you strategies on how to put yourself first, but also build a positive environment at home. But it's important to reflect on as to how you're putting yourself last, right? And what are really the areas of life that stress you out the most? If you want to share in the chat, I would love to know. I know for me, for example, if I'm going through a stressful period in my life, I drop everything I'm supposed to do to keep myself healthy, and I do my best to cater to everyone else around me. Not sleeping properly. Yeah. Yeah, making sure everyone else is okay too. Yeah. Anyone else? How are you putting yourself last? If you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's okay, but I hope that you're really just taking this moment right now to reflect on this for yourself. Yep, so overworking, making sure everyone has what they need, not making time to do the things I enjoy. Yeah. Husband saying that he doesn't put himself first for the fear of letting things fall apart. Yeah. And as you're all thinking about these things and reflecting on them, it's so important for you to reflect on these things and build a strategy around it. Because the thing is that when we consistently put ourselves last for a very long time, one, we start to grow resentment, right? Like you show up in life and you can feel really irritated and angry at other people, but really it's because this whole time you haven't been putting yourself first. And so other people are just like, wow, why are you snappy? You're irritable. And you're just like, oh, internally you're like, why can't you get it? Like, I'm here for you and no one is here for me. Two, it doesn't allow you to show up as the best version of yourself, right? And then oftentimes we end up feeling even worse about ourselves because we're just like, oh my God, why did I snap like that? Or, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I don't have time for this, this, and this. Or I can't show up for this person in this way because of how exhausted I am and I just don't feel good. And so if we really want to start, improving the lives of it, because I feel like for a lot of you, a lot of you said, you make sure everybody has what they have first, and then you decide to put yourself next, if you even have time for that, which oftentimes we don't, right? Is that when you put yourself first, it allows you to show up in the best way for everybody else around you. And I think for those of us who are in caregiver roles or who have this pressure to take care of our families, whether it be through caregiving or providing, it's so easy to put ourselves last, but that is literally the worst thing that we can do. And then what is also happening is that we are teaching our young people, and if you have kids at home, that in order to make things work and to have a successful family, you can never put yourself first, right? Because the truth is that kids learn through modeling, right? And though some of you can also just kind of think and reflect on, right? Some of the habits that you have or the things that you do, right? They might be as a result of the home environment that you've grown up in, right? And you might be like, oh my God, I'm doing what my mom did or I'm doing what my dad did, right? And again, we're not going to blame parenting for everything, right? Because your kids are associated with so much else in the world, but it does play a small part in who we become as adults later on, right? And you can compare yourself to your parents and see that as well. And so it's so important that you are thinking about how can you model what it's like to live a healthy lifestyle. How can you model what it's like to take care of yourself? And that not only allows you to put yourself first and help yourself feel better, but it also shows all the young people in your home that the way to really live a happy life is to put yourself first so that you can show up as the best version of yourself for everyone else around you. Right? So thinking about how can you be healthy at home? How can you show your kids, what it's like to take care of your mind and your body, right? How can you show your kids the type of healthy habits that you want them to have, thinking about how you can embody them first, right? If you want your kids to not be on social media for too long, right? Are you sitting on the sofa scrolling on your phone for hours? Right? Because, if you tell them not to, but then you're doing it, it's going to set a very different example and precedent for them. So I want to encourage you, if you have young people at home, think about how you can start embodying everything that you want them to embody. Right. And I know that that's a bit of a different mindset because for so many of us, depending on our culture, but like I'm South Asian. So all I have seen are women sacrificing their entire lives to make their families work. And, I love my mother and my aunts and my grandmothers, and they're amazing role models and women. But also it's time to start changing what it means to show up for family, whether, you're a man or woman or whatever gender you prefer, and really set the new standard of you have to take care of yourself in order to make things work. So just some things I want you to really think about as we're going through this workshop. And, what I really want you to, if this is anything you want to take away from this workshop, it's really this tip here. So what I'm going to go through now is I'm going to share the pillars of a positive home environment. And again, I'm a naturopathic doctor, so I'm going to be getting into the holistic approach and be sharing tips all from, mindset, diet, sleep, and movement. So you're going to get a bit of a mix of everything. So pillar number one of the most important ones is to get connected. I think it's so important that, whether you are a parent or not, like it's so important to let go of the shame and guilt associated with getting help. I actually suffered for chronic depression for 5 years, and that suffering could have probably been reduced to 1 year if I just decided to get help sooner. And so it's important that you reflect on the areas of your life and you think about where are you struggling the most and how can you get help with it, right? So if you're constantly feeling you're tired from work, you're taking care of your family, is there something you can outsource? Can you ask another family member for help and support so that you can get time for yourself, right? Because the thing is that we have to be really, really intentional about our life, and we have to let go of this expectation we have that we need to do everything on our own, right? The more you try to do everything on your own, the more that you will fail and the more that you will suffer, both mentally and physically, right? Like I have my own business and I can't do everything alone, right? My business would literally crumble and fall if I tried to do everything all by myself, right? And we can apply that kind of same concept to everything in our life. And so if you really want to flourish, I want to encourage you to think about how can you get help. Think about the tasks you don't like to do, right? Like if you have kids at home, ask them for help to do stuff, right? That's really why we have kids, so that they get older and they can do everything for you. So think about how you can get that help and really get creative with them. Another important piece about getting connected is being able to express how you feel. And if you have young people at home, really communicating how the best way to kind of express how you feel. And oftentimes for a lot of us, when we try to express ourselves, it ends up coming out in arguments. It's really, snappy, and things don't get communicated in the best way. So I'm also certified in cognitive behavioral therapy. And in CBT therapy, one of the best ways to communicate and to express and share yourself is by using something called I statements. Why I statements are so powerful is because they make everything about you and how you feel. It doesn't make it about the other person. Because as soon as we start going, you did this and I don't like when you do that, and start pointing fingers, that's when other people feel really triggered and upset. And so, what I statements and how they follow is, so how you start off with is you would say, I feel. So, whatever you feel. When, and here you state the action step, and you want to be careful to not be like when you simply just want to be like when and whatever the action was, because the reason why, and next time please, right? So let them know what you would prefer next time. And so, as simple as if your, kids or husband or whoever is not putting away the dishes after dinner. So you could say something like, I feel upset when the dishes are not put away after dinner because this means that I have to do more work. Next time, please put the dishes away after dinner, right? So super simple, super easy. And all I used in there were I statements. There was nothing about the other person, and it didn't feel like an attack, right? And so I really encourage you, and this is not even something to use with your kids, but with anyone in your life, right? Any time you want to set a boundary, you want to express how you feel, and you want to do it in a nice and kind way, I statements can be a very powerful way to express yourself. Use it at work, in your relationships, whoever, and watch how much more people listen to you, because now you're communicating clearly, you're communicating how you feel, and you're communicating what you want done instead. And then supporting children to building healthy relationships at home. So I always encourage, set communication rules with them, right? This is something that you can come up together as a family. And really get them involved in these things. I think that's one of the most important things that you can do with kids, is to get them involved with stuff, right? Don't just be like, here are the communication rules, follow them, right? Instead, have like a family meeting and be like, we're going to set communication rules together, and be like, what do you think is the kindest way to communicate? What are some rules that we can set together so that we can make sure that everybody feels cared for and like they're being listened to, right? And the more that they're involved in this, the more likely that they are to stick with this. Number two, I'm probably going to repeat this for every single step, right? Take a look at how you are modeling communication. And this doesn't mean now you don't, you hide conflicts and you make sure your kids never get to experience that, because conflicts are a very healthy part of life, right? Like there's an issue if you haven't experienced any conflict, right? We have a bigger issue then. And so it's important that if conflicts come up, or like, I don't know, say you have family at home, right? And you get into an argument with them. How are you modeling that, right? Is everybody yelling and screaming and shouting, right? Is there clear communication? Are there boundaries being set? The more that you start to model healthy communication, watch how it starts to change things up with your kids. Encouraging them to express their feelings and really respecting them, right? And this is really important too, because this allows your kids to see that whatever they're feeling is okay, and that's the truth, There's nothing wrong with feeling angry, with feeling sad, with feeling bad about yourself, right? All these feelings are valid. It's our action steps that aren't valid, right? It's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hit someone because you're angry, right? And so that's very important to emphasize, right? Like if your child is sad and upset, right? If they need to cry, let them cry, right? And really being mindful, you're telling them, oh, stop crying, or you're gonna be okay, or why are you crying about or this, right? Like that lets them know that, oh, I'm not allowed to cry. Like crying isn't a good emotion to feel. Right. So really, really being mindful of this because at the end of the day, I'm sure you care for them and you just want the best for them. So you probably want them to stop crying and it's coming from a good place. But subconsciously and internally, they can start to associate that with, oh, this isn't an okay emotion to feel. And then the last piece of this is really thinking about how you can encourage good behavior instead of criticizing bad behavior, right? Oftentimes kids get told no way more than they get told yes. So, really try to, this is a bit of something you might have to get creative with, right? It's so easy for us to really just criticize bad behavior right away. If, for example, going back to the dishes being left at the dinner table, right? If they're leaving the dishes at the dinner table being like, I love it when you put the dishes away after dinner, right? And praising them when they are doing the good behavior as much as possible. The other piece I wanted to just quickly share as well, there's been a lot of research actually done on this style of parenting. It's called the authoritative style. And this type of parenting, what it refers to is being warm and nurturing and loving, even when expressing disapproval of behavior, recognizing discipline as a form of teaching versus punishment. And this is a really important one here, right? Like letting children know the consequences in advance and making sure that you're trying to be as consistent with the consequences as possible, right? So, for example, if they have a limit on their phone or social media, right, letting them know what is exactly going to happen and the consequences of it if they cross that limit beforehand, and making sure you're not randomly making up these consequences, right? Because this will let them know exactly what will happen to them if they don't follow the rules and what they can expect. And it's not things that just randomly change all the time and is chaotic. Praising them for their efforts, right? So if a child comes home with a great grade, right? Instead of being like, oh my God, you got an A plus, that's amazing, right? Saying something like, wow, you must have worked really hard for that, right? Praising them for the efforts versus the outcome, because it's important to teach kids how to become process oriented instead of outcome oriented. Allowing children to experience difficulties and helping them find solutions without being overprotective, right? As much as you might want to jump in and save the day, if they're going through a challenge or a situation that's troubling them, being like, what do you think you should do about it? What do you feel like is the best way to get through this, right? Helping, like really encouraging them to turn their gears to solve this problem instead of jumping in. And then if you find that they're really struggling, of course, support them with it. Don't just leave them hanging. Involving children in making decisions that affect them and celebrating their wise choices. It's so important that we are slowly, giving children these chances of being independent as they're getting older. That's very, very important. I'm noticing a huge, newer generation of kids growing up being, a lot more dependent. And I work a lot in schools with teachers and principals, and I hear that same thing over and over again, right? The resiliency tends to be a lot lower. There's a lot more dependency, and there's a lot more issues in their ability to be able to solve problems, right? So really allowing children in to help make decisions at home, right? So for example, if you're going on a trip or something like that, give them, 3 options and they get to choose one of the options, right? To help them feel that they can make decisions and their opinion is valued. And then as your children get older or in the teen years, really, accepting their need for independence and encouraging them to develop their own beliefs and opinions, right? I'm not saying let them run wild and do what they want to do, but having that healthy balance is important. And really the most important thing here is with a lot of parents, parents are up here and kids are down here, right? And I totally get that. Of course, you have more life experiences and things that you've been through, and you probably do know better than them. But the thing is that this creates a very big power imbalance at home, right? And so it's so important that there is as little of a power imbalance as possible, because this will actually allow your kids to listen to you and want to talk to you, right? And so really thinking about how you can kind of balance this out and involving them in decisions and accepting their need for independence and encouraging that, because, you know, one day they're going to be adults and we want to make sure that they're able to go into the world and they're able to handle challenges on their own. And this on the side are all these amazing benefits of using the authoritative style of parenting. Any questions on anything that I have shared so far? Any thoughts coming up for anyone?
This is great.
Yeah, great. Okay,
Awesome. Because
great.
I grew up the same way, you know, my parents are very authoritative, and I have 3 younger children, and I find myself speaking like how my parents spoke to me. And now I'm learning that, wait a minute. And so this is a good reminder,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a 16-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And it's all different, you know,
Yeah.
phases. And my oldest son, the 16-year-old, it's like, wait a minute, you're a teenager? Oh my goodness. I remember when I was a teenager, I was not allowed to do anything. Anything. So
Yeah.
what you're sharing is such a beautiful reminder.
Yeah, great. I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
to. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. My pleasure. Okay, so let's keep going through this. And the last quick piece I just wanted to share in terms of getting connected was the social media piece of things. So again, I'm going to go back to that piece about what you model, right? Like if you don't want them to be on their phones after a certain time or be scrolling on apps, right? Be mindful, right? If you want to do this, you know, if you want to scroll on Instagram for 5 hours, you know, it makes you happy, go do it. But just be mindful. If you're setting these rules with them, just don't do it in front of them at least. Okay. Like go do it in your room, go do it not in front of them, because it's going to be really difficult for them to want to follow the rules and to be able to trust you as their adult, their caregiver, if you are breaking the rules you want them to follow right in front of them. Right. So just really being mindful of that. And also the more that you follow the rules too, the more that they will as well. And so it's just some tips, quick tips that I have is, you know, encouraging kindness, showing them what's appropriate versus not. I always encourage all parents, right? Get the apps your kids have, get used to them, see what they're all about, right? If they're on them all the time and doing things, it's important that you know what the apps are about, because every app is so different, right? Like TikTok, the videos are, you know, really short. Instagram has videos, but it also has photos and things like that. So different things are being shared on different apps. And the more knowledgeable you are, the better discussions that you can have with them, right? Teaching them things like how to report mean accounts. And, you know, no matter how old your child is, like you can still have these discussions with them, right? Don't think that, oh, my child's 18, like too late for him. No, like you can still have these discussions with them. It might just look a little bit different for you, right? You can even create social media rules together, right? So in your home, like, you know, no phones after 8 p.m. or something like that, and something that you all follow together. Teaching them the signs that indicate social media is having a negative impact on their mental health so they can talk to you about it, right? So if they're finding themselves scrolling all day, if it's, you know, when they're on their social media app, they're just on it for so long that they don't even do any of their other work, they notice themselves feeling way worse after they get off the apps, right? Maybe they notice people saying mean things and commenting mean things on them. So just having these open discussions with them. And something else you can do too is schedule weekly social media check-ins just as a family, right? This can be something you do like every Thursday night at dinner time, right? We all share what we've been doing on the apps, what we've been posting, or anything you saw on the apps, right? I encourage you to get involved in these discussions too, and not just make it be like, you know, you're just asking them all the questions and you're not sharing anything on your own, but make this be a family thing. And this just is a healthy way to have social media conversations with your kids, because the truth is that social media is not going away anytime soon. And the more that we can teach our young people how to have a healthy relationship with it, the better. Okay, so pillar number 2 is applying the holistic approach. So it's very important that all of you understand that your mind and body are connected. For a lot of us, we think that great mental health is all up here, and that can't be further from the truth. And a lot of what I do in my practice is helping people correct the body dysfunctions that actually lead to mental health disorders. And so it's important that we, really teaching young people to build healthy habits early on. And when it comes to the holistic approach, this includes optimizing diet, sleep, and exercise. And as always, as you can notice, this will come up with every pillar. I want you to ask yourself, how can I be the healthiest version of myself and model that? So I want to know from all of you, what are some things coming to your mind that you feel like you can improve when it comes to your diet, sleep, and exercise? Yeah, bringing lunch to work and not skipping lunch. That's a big one. I skipped my lunch today and then I ate 2 cookies because that's what happens. Yeah. Says he wants to eat healthier, making better food choices. Yeah. To be honest, diet tends to be the trickiest one for people to improve. And then it's one thing improving it, and then there is another thing being consistent with it, right? Yeah, thanks for sharing that, asking that, Tina. When things bother me, I tend to eat more. How do we control this? Yeah. So keep in mind that food is very addictive, right? Similar to social media apps, the food that we eat is extremely addictive. It's full of fats and sugars and additives. And to be honest with you, the corporations like McDonald's and whatnot, or companies that make chips, they want the foods to be addictive because they want you to consume a lot of them, right? So really keeping that in mind. And what's also interesting, right? Because most of the time we tend to turn towards carby, sugary things. And what ends up happening is that whenever we eat any sort of carbs or sugar, your body breaks it down into a molecule called glucose. And so glucose actually goes and activates an area in your brain called the nucleus accumbens. This area in your brain is also activated when you eat, when you take drugs like cocaine and heroin. And so when we're eating high carby, high sugary foods, we're literally activating the areas of our brain that are activated by hard drugs. And so this is another reason why food can be so addictive and why it's so comforting and why we feel like we need to turn to it when we're not feeling so good, because it raises our dopamine levels, which is like, that excitatory addiction hormone, gets us motivated, makes us feel good. It even raises our serotonin, which is our happiness hormone. And then we quickly crash and then we're left craving and wanting more. Right. And so understanding this is just really important. And so when you're feeling bothered, one, it's really important to develop a certain level of awareness, right? Because for a lot of us, turning towards food, it's very quick, it's very automatic. So it's important you're thinking about, how can I take a pause before I turn to that food to grab it and eat it, right? Number two, it's important that you're developing really healthy stress or anxiety coping strategies and you're implementing them throughout your day. Because if we're constantly on the go, if we're stressed out all the time, our mind is going to want a quick fix in order to feel happy and to feel good, right? And I can even give my example today. Like, I skipped lunch today and then I was just feeling really, really stressed out. And then I ended up eating 2 cookies, right? Because I was really stressed out. And then I automatically felt better. And then I also automatically felt worse as well. And so the more that you can start to implement healthy stress management coping strategies and do these throughout your day, the less you'll feel bothered by things and the more that you will feel in control of your ability to choose the foods in front of you. Getting and developing that ability to just pause before you act is going to be very important as well. And then, you have to try different strategies to see what works for you. Some people find that if they're craving something, they might do like go on a walk or something like that. Some people might, have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Some people will still eat something, but they'll make sure they have like veggies or something cut up and something healthy that they can reach for instead. But ultimately, you want to develop a healthier coping strategy than turning towards food. So you do that instead, and you want to train your brain to start seeing the comfort in that instead of food. So I hope that helps. Yeah, I started eating healthy, low carbs and avoid sweets. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, Janet. Exactly as I said, finding activities to do instead of eating, right? We don't want to use food as a coping strategy. And also be really careful of your what you're teaching young people too, right? For example, like we tend to celebrate a lot with food, right? Maybe they win a sports game or something like that, right? Oh, it's going to be pizza, or oh, let's go for ice cream, right? Oh my God, you got an A on a math test. Let's, we're going to order pizza or whatever, something like that, right? So really being mindful of that, because then we're just training kids that when you do something good, reward yourself with food. Right. So really experimenting and seeing what are different ways that you as a family can celebrate that don't always revolve around food, right? Maybe they get to choose a fun activity to do on the weekend instead. So really being mindful of that. So going back to this question, how can I be the healthiest version of myself and model that? Really important. As you can see, there's tons of little reflection questions that I have in here. Whenever we want to improve in an area, it's important to reflect on where are you struggling in so that you can build a strategy around it. Even with the patients I work with, I always say that we are capable of building an amazing life and building the health that we want. It all comes down to the strategy and our ability to implement it. So always keep that in mind. So let's go through it. So with diet, I'm going to share some tips. So, as you all probably know, diet is really important, right? The food that we feed our bodies, what our body uses to function. And if we're not giving our bodies the right tools, our bodies can't build what they need in order to feel good. So just some tips I have. These apply for you and for your kids. Number one tip, reducing sugary breakfast and really carb heavy breakfast. Why this is so important is because whenever you eat anything carby and sugary, your blood sugar levels spike up really, really high, right? So if you're eating, cereals and a lot of breads and things like that for breakfast, your blood sugar level is spiking up and then boom, you're crashing even before lunch comes. And this crash is when we start to feel tired, we have more cravings, right? And we feel like, we don't have the energy needed to continue the day. And this is usually when people have their second coffee too, but no one thinks about, oh, what did I eat for breakfast? And really important to look at your kids as well, right? Because if we want our kids to be able to concentrate at school, be able to focus, we have to make sure that we're giving them the right foods to be able to do that. So really for breakfast, you want to aim to eat things that are high in protein, right? So eating things like eggs, and you don't always have to have breakfast food for breakfast. Keep that in mind as well, right? Corporations and the food companies make us believe that we need like bread and toast and cereals and all that stuff for breakfast, but you could literally have, chicken and veggies for breakfast if you wanted to, right? So don't think that, oh my God, I'm not having toast, like I'm not really eating breakfast, right? You can have anything you want for breakfast. It doesn't have to be a breakfast food. So focusing on more of the proteins and healthy fats. So healthy fats includes things like avocados, nuts and seeds, nut butters, healthy oils like coconut oil, olive oil. All those foods are really, really great for our mind and our bodies. And really, the other big thing too is aiming for 4 to 5 servings of veggies a day. I find that a lot of us are missing vegetables from our diet. I always recommend that half your plate should be vegetables at every meal. And yes, even breakfast, right? This morning, I had toast and eggs, and I had a bunch of steamed vegetables on the side, right? Vegetables are the most nutritious foods that we can feed our bodies. And so really thinking about how you can incorporate them in your diet. And I always say veggies should be the star of the show. For a lot of us, we put carbs on our plate first, then we put protein, and then maybe we'll put some vegetables a little bit on the side, right? Instead, when you plate your food, I want you to think about what is the vegetable that I'm going to eat, or the vegetables, a few of them, then put your proteins, then the healthy fats, and you want to sprinkle on the carbs, right? If you eat enough vegetables, you will get full. A lot of us think that we need rice or we need toast or something to keep us full, but really we just need more protein and healthy fats and vegetables, right? Like if you eat, like 4 or 5 cups of vegetables, you will feel full, okay? And you won't feel like you need something else. The other piece that can help as well, right? Get your kids involved with cooking, right? So if you're making dinner and you're really, you feel rushed, or, you're making breakfast in the morning, like get them to help you out, get them to make their lunches, right? And I think it's really important that we break away from the mindset of I have to do it on my own, right? Or like a good mother or a good father does everything on their own, right? And then the kids just, they can roll out of bed 5 minutes before and just pick up their bags and go, right? Get them to wake up early, get them to help you out, right? And explain to them that we're a family, and sometimes I need help, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And so get them involved with cooking. Next tip is to eat food slowly at the table, right? It's one thing eating healthy, but then it's another thing making sure your body is in a calm state where it can absorb the food that you're eating. For a lot of us, we'll eat in distracted environments, or we're not paying attention to what's happening in our bodies when we eat. And because of that, we actually experience so many digestive symptoms. Before I give anybody anything to help them with their digestion, I'm just like, chew your food, right? And that takes away so much of the issues that they are experiencing. And so really making sure that you're not eating in a distracted environment. And then lastly, avoiding over caffeinating, right? And really, really being mindful of that. And especially with your young kids too, right? I see so many young kids that I work with and they're having like 3-4 cups of coffee a day. And I'm like, no wonder you have anxiety, right? So really being mindful of what they're consuming, and then you as well, right? If you're feeling like you can't wake up without coffee, or you just can't get through the afternoon without coffee, take a look at your food, and then also take a look at your sleep as well. Because when those are optimized, movement is another important piece as well. And movement is so beneficial to our brain for a number of reasons. When we move our brains have increased blood flow. Our brain actually goes through a process called neurogenesis. So this is when our brain builds new neurons and connections and pathways. It decreases stress and it increases your feel-good hormones and neurotransmitters and protects the brain against aging. I usually recommend a minimum of 30 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Research is coming out to show that sitting is like the new smoking, right? So it's really important that we're taking the time to move our bodies, especially if you're feeling really stressed out and anxious. Move your body. It's so important because it gives those feelings a place to go. Because if these feelings continue to build up inside of us, this is what leads to breakdowns and fights and all that irritability. So the more you move your body, the more it actually gives that stressed out energy a place to go. And then sleep is also very important for you and for any young people in your life as well. The best tip that I have, actually two for sleep. One is avoiding technology 30 minutes before bed. This is really important because technology actually puts your body into the stress state. And when your body's in the stress state, it's not going to want to fall asleep. So instead, during this time, develop a sleeping ritual. So think about some activities, and you can even do this as a family, right? Maybe you have a little basket that everybody has to put their phone in before going to sleep at night. Right? And this is going to be really great for health. And invest in alarm clocks. A lot of people are like, I need my phone for, an alarm clock. And I have an alarm clock at home, so I don't even, use my phone as alarm clock, so that I can put my phone away way earlier in the evening. And instead, during this time, thinking about a sleeping ritual you can develop. You can read, you can take a hot bath, you can do some light stretches, you can hang around together as a family if you want to. But whatever you do, just make sure it doesn't revolve around technology and you're not doing any sort of work before bed, because that is going to keep you up. So that is the holistic approach when it comes to having great mental health. The last part that I really wanted to cover is optimizing your environment, right? So starting with the external environment, a few little fun tips that I have is you can actually create a space or corner in your home that is specifically for a place where people can go to de-stress, essentially, right? And this is something that you can come up together as a family. This can be a space in a living room or a family room, or in the kitchen, wherever feels most comfortable. And you can have a few little de-stress things on there, right? So if your child is feeling like they're stressed out, or if you're feeling like you're stressed out, you can literally go in this corner and do some activities to help you be calm, right? The other tips that I have for all of you specifically is keep things around that can be used as coping strategies during stressful times, right? So maybe you're someone who loves to do yoga. Don't keep your yoga mat in a cabinet in the dark somewhere far away that you just forget about, right? Because when you're stressed out, you're not going to think about going to it. But if that yoga mat is sitting right in front of you, right? Maybe it's right beside your desk where you work or whatever, you are more likely to turn to it. So keep your stress management coping strategies out in the open, where you remember to actually turn to them and use them, right? So if you like to read, keep your books around and out and about so that you are more likely to turn to them and use them. And the last tip I have for all of you is to create rituals, right? So everyone, and you know what, I should have put midday in here as well, is you should be doing something for 5 to 10 minutes for yourself in the morning, after work, and when you go to bed, before you go to bed. And I would even recommend something in the middle of your day as well. Because for a lot of us, we are constantly on the go. Our schedules are so busy. And then when we finally get a chance to be with ourselves in the evening, at night, before we go to sleep, we can't go to sleep because we never took the time to process our emotions during the day. So now we're experiencing this huge wave of emotions and stress, and we can't fall asleep because we didn't give our mind and body the chance to process things in the morning or during the day. So think about a few things that you can do during these times. And again, it doesn't have to be long, right? You waking up 10 minutes earlier to take a few deep breaths before the chaos of your house starts can help you to have a stronger foundation. You doing something after work, whether it be a 10-minute walk, or again, go back to the deep breathing. I'm such a big fan of that, right? Before you transition into your personal life, can help you to show up in your personal life in a much better way, right? And then doing that before sleep is going to be really helpful to improve your sleep. The more you process your emotions throughout the day, the more you get in touch with yourself, the less you'll have to process in the evening, and the better you'll show up for the people in your life as well. So you can use these little moments to take care of yourself, right? No matter how busy you are. I know all of you have at least 5 to 10 minutes to commit to yourself throughout the day, because I know you're at least going on Instagram a couple times to just look at stuff. Okay. So take that time and instead put that time towards yourself, and make this be a non-negotiable, right? So non-negotiable, putting yourself first is a non-negotiable, right? The same way a work meeting is a non-negotiable, right? The same way you make dinner for your family because they have to eat, that is a non-negotiable. Taking care of yourself is a non-negotiable, whatever that looks like for you. Kat is a professional at taking care of himself, 100%. Yeah, love that. Cats are always good at that. And then the last piece of optimizing your environment is your internal environment, right? And really, self-kindness and acceptance are going to be key. Some days you're going to be crushing it, you're going to be doing great, and other days it's going to feel like complete chaos, right? You're going to feel like a chicken with your head cut off. And that's normal. It doesn't mean that now you suck. It doesn't mean that, all the hard work you've been putting in is completely gone. It's just simply how life works. So don't be mean to yourself about it, right? And really watch how you talk about yourself in front of your kids, right? Because again, it can come out so subconsciously, right? Like, do you look in the mirror in front of your kids? And again, come subconsciously, right? Before you leave the house, might say out loud, like, oh my God, I look so fat, or I look so ugly in this, or whatever, right? Being mindful of that and how you're talking to yourself, right? If you would not want your kids to talk to themselves this way, then you shouldn't be talking to yourself that way as well, because you set that standard, okay? Challenging your negative thinking and teaching your children how to do it too. So I'm going to be actually teaching you 5 questions that you can use to challenge your negative thoughts and turn those negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And these are things that you can practice with your kids as well. And then the last tip here is to practice gratitude as a family. Gratitude is such a beautiful crutch that we can use to help ourselves get to a positive state. Right? So this is something you can practice together in the morning, at breakfast, or at dinner, right? And really getting into the practice of just saying, what are you grateful for, right? And trying to put the focus on that as much as possible. Oh, sorry, I thought I wrote the questions, but I can go through them. So in terms of the challenging negative thinking questions, it's important to remember that just because your mind thinks a negative thought doesn't mean that you have to sit in that negative thought, right? Everybody's mind thinks negatively first, even my mind. Okay, so it's not wrong for your mind to think negatively. And so to really start switching your mindset and turning it into a positive mindset is to start challenging these negative thoughts as they come up. So I'll just share 2 questions with you. I'm trying to be mindful of the time. And so question number 1 is to ask yourself, what would I tell a friend if they were in this situation, right? So if you find yourself being really hard and mean to yourself, asking yourself what you would tell a friend, because oftentimes we're so nice and kind to the people around us, but we're so mean to ourselves. So this helps to just switch that perspective. And then question number 2 is to ask yourself, is this going to matter in a year? How about 5 years? Right? A problem can seem so big in the moment, but we forget that in the future, it's not going to matter as much, right? And most of you probably don't even remember some of the challenges that you had 5 years ago. And if you do remember them, you're still able to get through that, right? So this just really helps to put things into perspective. And these are questions you can use with your kids as well. And so really just to end it off, what all of you, I encourage all of you to do this, right? Take 5 minutes, even just after this workshop. Determine the 3 to 5 things you must do in order to feel good, right? It's going to look different for all of you, right? I know that, I have to get my walk in every single day. I need to do my journaling and my meditation. And without a doubt, I try to make sure I do these things, right? So determine what those things are for you, right? Maybe you want to read your book or do some yoga or whatever it is, and then think about how you're going to implement them in your schedule, right? If you don't schedule these things, they're not going to happen, right? And you can even set a rule with your family, like 8 to 8:30 is your time. No one in the home is allowed to bother you, right? Or maybe it's 9 o'clock or whatever time it is. You can set that rule with your family, right? Know that you are allowed to ask for this time for yourself. It doesn't make you a bad parent or a bad person for asking that, right? So really keep that in mind. And so determine these 3 to 5 things you need to do in order to feel good, and really intentionally schedule them in your day. If I don't schedule my self-care, it's not happening. Life is just too busy, and life always gets in the way, right? And I feel that, and I'm very much of a caregiver, right? So I will put people before me. So I have to be really intentional and careful about scheduling myself first. And yeah, and just to really emphasize this, right? If we are not planning for health, we are planning for disease. Our lives are busy. Our food is toxic. Our air is toxic, right? We're stressed out all the time. We have to be intentional about our health, right? What good are you if you end up in a place where your health is so bad you can't even be around your kids, right? So really, really keep that in mind, right? And so the more that you take care of yourself, the better you show up for the people around you. So I encourage all of you, plan for your health and be intentional about it, because no one else is going to do it for you. And set that standard for the young people at home that you can still have a great family life by putting yourself first. And let that be the new standard for our young people today, so that they don't feel like they have to sacrifice their entire lives in order to make things work, because it doesn't have to be like that. So thank you so much for being here. I hope that this was helpful and that you took away some really good tools and tips from it. If you do want to connect with me, feel free to do so. I have my information there. I'm more than happy to answer your questions, or if you want to work with me, I can also share more information on that. But I'm more than happy to stick around for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions.
I also do mindful meditation myself. However, I was very intrigued by what you mentioned about breath work,
Yeah.
and I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah.
And
I'm more than, yeah. Go ahead.
And I really liked, now I'm home, I'm no longer working, and I really liked how you emphasized to include some self-care during the day.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
morning, I do it, nighttime, I do it, but then I just boom, 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 boom for the day. And now that I'm home, it's like, what am I doing? I really liked how you emphasized also to take time midday to take care of yourself. And I want to do the breath work.
Yeah, I'll talk about the breath, but yeah, that's a great point you bring up, right? Like we have the morning and the evening, but then our day just passes by us without us taking care of ourselves. So important to do that. In terms of the breath work, the big piece that I always like to emphasize. So I love all breath work, but in order to really activate that calming system in our body, we really have to make sure we're breathing from our belly. So these are called diaphragmatic breaths, because for a lot of us, we can still sometimes end up breathing from our chest. And when we breathe from our chest, our body doesn't actually get into that relaxing, restful state. And so the other tip too that's important to note as well is you want to make sure your exhale is slower than your inhale. Because the research has shown that when our exhale is actually slower, our body gets more into that relaxed, calming state. So really slow, deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, making sure the exhale is longer than the inhale, and you're really breathing from the belly, and the chest isn't moving as much. So you can actually look that up later. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. I'm sure there's probably tons of YouTube videos on it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Rosemary asked suggestions for journaling for mental health. Yeah, so this depends on what your goal really for journaling is. If you are just looking for a way to just get what's in your head out onto a piece of paper. In CBT, there's an exercise, it's called mind dumping. And essentially what you do is you literally take a pen and paper and you just write down all the thoughts that you're experiencing. And no matter how silly or wacky they seem, you just write it out. And it's just a very simple way to get stuff from your head out onto a piece of paper. The other way that you can journal, again, it just depends on your goal, is that you can follow journaling prompts, right? There are tons available on Google where you can kind of go through and be like, just follow the prompts, right? So like, what are you grateful for? Or what emotions and thoughts came up today? I think that journaling can be a really good way to help yourself work through your thoughts and emotions. So if you are, going through a challenging situation, or if you're feeling triggered, really writing out like, what are you experiencing? What's going on in your mind? Where is this coming from? Right? It can be a really powerful way to allow you to work through some of your thoughts and emotions. And then, sometimes the way that I use journaling is I like to write out the vision of my life that I'm creating and what I'm working towards. I like to write out the things that I'm grateful for as well. So it all just depends on your goal. And there's different ways to journal depending on what the goal is.
Okay, it looks like a great presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Bisleen Attli, and
My
also
pleasure.
the participants for your wonderful questions. Basically, the presentation from the myths you started, and then all the practical tips you gave. Uh, Definitely, it will be useful for everyone who participated today. So I would like to really thank you. This is the second time you are doing this presentation, and
My
thank you
pleasure.
again for doing it. Um, I think everyone enjoyed, and thank you everyone. If you have any questions, Dr. Bisleen sent you, sorry, gave you the email address, you can, or if you have any questions, you can send it to me. I can forward it to Dr. Bisleen too. So,
Yeah.
uh, everyone, thank you very much, and have a good night.